All right. Well, welcome everyone back to our afternoon or early evening, depending where you're calling in or logging to our program in the afternoon. Thank you for your perseverance through the morning. Great presentations. I was in the Think Fun booth with Bill Ritchie and had a great time greeting people, asking about Think Fun, and hope similarly you were able to enjoy the networking, the booths, or getting lunch and getting a chance to go outside and get some fresh air. I'm thrilled that our afternoon keynote presenter is Jaime Saavedra. Jaime, thanks for joining us. We're thrilled to have you join us, Jaime, with such an extensive background in terms of your role with global education, in terms of leading the global education practice in education at the World Bank Group, where you rejoined, we were just talking about after a period of time, in between of which where you were the Minister of Education from 2013 to 2016 in Peru. So obviously bring that experience, but also in terms of just your experiences in global education and national education for quite a number of years. Prior to assuming your role as the Minister of Education in Peru, you had a 10-year career at the World Bank, where you served as, you were just mentioning to me, the Director for Poverty Reduction and Equity, and as the Acting Vice President for Poverty Reduction and the Economic Management Network. You hold a PhD in economics from Columbia University and a bachelor's from Catholic University of Peru. Jaime, I can't imagine sort of an individual that has such a depth and range of experiences about the importance of global and national education is to settle us again about the importance and the challenges that we have as we continue our discussion over the next day and a half. So invite you to provide some of your keynote comments, and thank you again, Jaime.
Thank you very much, Tony. Can you see me and hear me well? Excellent. Thank you very much. And I'm scared now by your introduction. You're putting high expectations here. First, I just wanna first of all thank the M Education Alliance for this partnership of many years. I mean, with the World Bank, and I think all this is about partnerships, and it's essential that as a global donor community, right, to work leveraging knowledge and innovation from everywhere, right? And also, in addition to the M Education Alliance, wanted to thank Lego Foundation for sponsoring this event and for the huge support to and to make us all use the word play much more in our presentation and in our work. And finally, recognize DFID, well, before called DFID, the UK cooperation, now FCDO, working together with the World Bank, supporting the EdTech Hub that now is working very closely with the M Education Alliance. So thanks for that. Now I'll do the scary part of trying to share my screen. Hope this will work well. If not, Nicole will help me. Let me see. Okay. Okie dokie. I think we're fine. Okay, you will let me know if there's a problem here. But look, what I wanted to share quickly with you in this 15 minutes is this is about human connections and then how to use EdTech to eliminate learning poverty. But before going to say just a few words about EdTech, because you're the guys who know about this, let me talk about what's the problem that we have today. And Before COVID hit, I mean, if this presentation would have happened 6 months ago, I would have said we're already living a learning crisis. I would say, we're already far off track of reaching the SDG 4. And I'm going to mention what that is now. And we were already in a system with extreme inequality of opportunities in the world. Now, the goalpost of our work in education has moved now. I mean, our goal is to have better, more inclusive education systems, but now the situation is much more complicated. COVID has dealt two major shocks to education, and this is one thing that sometimes we don't put two things together. We have had in many countries school closures before. Yes, I mean, there's been a political problem, a strike, and there has been school closures. Not as long as we're living in many low and middle income countries today. We have had economic shocks before. Yes, of course, all countries have lived recessions, right? That have a pressure on public budgets and in family budgets in order to invest in education. What we have never had is the two things at the same time. So many countries are experiencing long school closures, and in the moment in which after the school closure you need to say you need to say, look, now I need to invest more in education. You have all countries with their deepest recession in a century, right? So much weaker economies in order to respond to those school closures. So this combination is something we have never seen before, and is happening all over the world, right? So it's happening in poor countries and rich countries. So obviously, then the possibilities of richer countries then to support all poorer countries who are now suffering this is much it's much more complicated. Without aggressive policy response, despite these problems, without aggressive response, this could have permanent effects on human capital, on learning, on schooling attainment, on mental health, and that will fall, and that will have an impact later on well-being and productivity, um, um, and social stability. These shocks may hit early childhood education, can hit foundational skills especially hard. And education, and you know this better than me, is that it's hard about human connections. And many of these human connections are more complicated today than they were before. We would probably be having this in person. I mean, in if this will not have be happening. So, but we need first to understand where countries were headed before the pandemic hit. Understand saying by 2030, we need to ensure that all girls and boys complete free, equitable, and quality primary and secondary education. This has been signed by hundreds of countries. This was the goal for SD for 2030. But the question for us is, was it possible at 2030 all kids will be in school, all of them in primary and secondary, and with quality education, right? Was this going to happen? And the answer probably was no. This was, in any case, was not going to happen. Why? Because still today, we have still a quantity problem. We have more than 200, about 260 million kids still out of school, right? Who should be kids between the ages of 16 and 18 who should be in school. They're not in school. And in sub-Saharan Africa, we're talking about a quarter of kids who should be in school and are not in school. So it's not that we only have a quality problem because the quantity problem has been solved. That's not the case. The access problem is still there. But in addition to the access problem, the fact that many kids are not in school, the other problem is where kids who are in school are not necessarily learning. There's quality issues in education. But the challenge that we had was how can we measure that in a simple way, in a way that everyone would understand what's the quality problem that we had. And one way of doing it, there are many quality indicators in education, but one way of saying it in a simple way was, what's the share of children in a country who cannot read and understand a simple text by age 10, right? Very simple. At age 10, all kids should be able to read and understand a text, a simple text. Actually, that's a low bar. Many of our kids, we want them to read a short novel by age 10, but let's keep that short, that low bar. Percentage of people who cannot read and understand a simple text. That we call learning poverty. That number should be zero. That number should be zero, right? Unfortunately, that number in low and middle income countries is 53%. More than half of kids, most of them who are in school, because in the same way that I was saying 250 million kids are not in school, you have almost like 2 billion kids who are in school. So most of the children are in school. Many of them, despite that, cannot read and understand a text, a simple text by age 10, more than half. That's not a problem, that's a crisis. Now, some people say, but why are you focusing on reading? And I say, look, there are many indicators that can reflect quality of education. But reading is critical because reading is a crucial gateway for further learning, right? You need to read at 10 because after that, you're using reading in order to learn other stuff. Reading is a foundation upon which all other critical skills are built, right? And when kids cannot read by late primary, right, it's much harder to catch up. So it's not like, well, let's read them. If it's not at 10, it could be later, and it's fine. No, it's not fine, right? It has to be early. It has to be at the right age. Highly correlated with many other skills we care about: math, science, social emotional skills. So reading is really absolutely critical. Problem now, that number that was 53% might be 63% today if we don't act quickly. right? So now it's more complicated, right? In order to achieve that learning poverty that in principle should be zero, because all kids should be able to read and understand a text. Before we have a high bar, now we have an even higher bar. Now, in addition to that, so in addition to saying that we have a problem in terms of learning poverty in countries, um, what can be happening inside countries, within countries? So as I was saying, so we have more a higher bar, right, in terms of the learning poverty is going up in low and middle income countries, but then also of inequality of opportunities within countries. So let me take the example of Brazil. In Brazil, learning poverty is 48%. That means basically half of kids in Brazil, most of them who are in school, cannot read and understand a text by age 10. But there's one point within Brazil that in Brazil you have some places that look like France in terms of learning poverty, others look like Honduras. So in terms of is success story here in the northeast of Brazil, right, have a level of learning poverty of only 7%. So most of the kids can read and understand a text in the municipality of Sobral. Uh, that's the level similar to France. In Sao Paulo, it's kind of in the middle of the table, right? 27% is learning poverty. So a quarter of kids cannot read and understand the text. But in Maranhão, right, in the Northeast, it's about 70%. Right? 70%. That's similar to Honduras. In African countries, this number would be around 90%. Sub-Saharan Africa, its number would be around 90%. So look, within Brazil, you have different types of countries, different part. It's many worlds even within Brazil. So learning poverty was high. Many kids were not able to read, and inequality even within countries was very high. And let me show you an example in Colombia in which way this inequality could be even low, even higher now because of COVID. So one thing that has happened with the crisis is that many countries have implemented different types of remote learning strategies, and some of them have been discussed in these days in the event. It's a combination. Most of the strategies a combination of online with radio, TV, printed material. But many countries have said, look, it cannot be online only, because in most countries, middle-income countries, online you will reach between 40 and 50% of kids. In poorer countries, online you will reach 10% of kids. What we have here is what are the learning losses comparing the poor and the rich in Colombia, and these two curves is depending on the number of school days since schools have closed, right? And actually, we are approaching like the right side of this table in terms of 150 days out of school, and the learning losses are about double for the poor than for kids in Colombia than for rich kids in Colombia. Why? Basically because I mean the possibilities of having high quality or better quality remote learning are much lower for the poor than for the rich. So one of the key challenges of coping with uh, with these school closures that can be done through remote learning, obviously that coping is much easier for richer kids than poorer kids. So hence, we're in a larger problem in general, but the inequality that already existed is now even larger. Now, let me close quickly, talking about then how can technology and innovation in education, talking about what the work that we're doing here at the bank can reimagine these human connections. We need to move to a world in which definitely need to close the digital divide that we have seen, that we have been talking about that digital divide for the last 10 or 20 years, right? Well, now this is kind of a slap in the face, right? There was a digital divide. We didn't do enough. Now we're living the consequences. With a closed digital divide, it would have been easier, right, to reach more kids. Would have been the perfect solution because we're not replacing the human connections perfectly, but would have been a better, an easier task. Now, when we talk about technology and how can technology help education at the bank, we're just try to focus our work using these five principles. The first principle is always ask why. What is the problem that we want to solve? Is it a problem of how to manage better the system? Is it a problem of improving the teacher student interaction in the classroom? Is it about helping those who are falling behind? So we need to always have clarity in terms of why is that we need to use technology. Second, we need to design for scale. That's absolutely critical. We need to worry about how to cover everyone. This is not for a group of schools. This is not for the schools who can have connectivity today. How can we use technology solutions to reach the poorest, to reach those who are more in trouble? Third principle is this is about empowering teachers. Technology is about not replacing the teacher, but it's about making and enhancing the effectiveness of teachers. It's not about replacing, is a right combination between the human factor and technology. Fourth principle, engage the ecosystem. In the sense, first of all, that is not only about the Ministry of Education, this is about many stakeholders, and it's not only about software and hardware, it's about having the right hardware. Of course, you need that. You need to have the right software. You need to have the right digital tools. You need to have the right connectivity. You need to have the right training of teachers. You need to have the right integration of technology with the curriculum. If you don't have all those elements, most of in all cases, a single investment in technology will not have, in some cases, any impact. And finally, we can have the huge opportunity with technology being data driven, in the sense that we use digital tools, we generate data. And generating data then has to be used in order to improve the quality of those tools. Now, the other three things I want to mention regarding what our work can be and how can we work more and better with many of you guys is that first we need to discover what's out there, right? Actually, the discovery is in part attending these conferences, right? What's out there? How can we document and generate and analyze evidence about what are the technology solutions that can be used at the country level? Once we have a better curation, once there's better knowledge about what's out there, is our other challenge at the World Bank, working with governments, is to deploy those solutions first as pilots in some cases, but then scaling up. And for us, the scaling up is almost an obsession, because we need to worry about how can we reach everyone in an education system. And the third part of our task is then how to diffuse this knowledge widely across policymakers and across um, all governments. Now, when we want to use technology, we need to work on the different fronts of our education approach. And in these slides, I'm summarizing a lot in terms of our work. We have a five-pillar approach, right? That it's about addressing the needs of learners, that learners, children, and young people are prepared and motivated to learn. And the role of parents in doing that is absolutely central. The second key player is teachers, right? And reforming teachers' careers and providing the right teachers' professional development is absolutely essential. And it's probably one of the most, or if not the most important factor that defines quality of an education system. Third, we need to make sure that classrooms are an effective and impactful learning space, and we have the right interaction between teachers and students. Fourth, schools have to be safe and inclusive spaces, right? Safe in terms of bullying, in terms of no any type of violence or sexual violence, or any type of physical or psychological violence. Have to be inclusive spaces in the sense of making sure that all kids of any type of disability will be able to use schools effectively. That all kids are taught in their mother tongue, for instance. So making the school a safe and inclusive space is critical. And finally, the issue of management. Managing the education system is extremely complex. Is delivering high quality service. Is a very difficult service to millions of kids every single day. Is a very difficult um, um, system to manage. And in all those five pillars, learners, teachers, classrooms, schools, education system, we need to use technology, right, in order to make the system more effective. when we talk about learners, we're talking about apps for early grade reading. When we talk about teachers, is how to use technology, virtual coaching. How can we improve and have a blended type of teachers preparation systems? When we talk about classrooms, we're talking about implementing digital assessment, teaching to the right level using technological tools. Um, when we talk about school of safe places, we can use a lot of technology in order to improve the quality of the service for kids with disability. And obviously, when talking about management, right, we can use technology to improve HR systems, mobile payments, biometrics for attendance, track and tracing, and all the systems that you know well in terms of information and management systems. So a lot to do in terms of closing the digital divide, working in all these areas that in which we need to work in order to improve the quality of the system. So a lot to do, a huge homework that you guys have. So we just need to click start and start working in terms of having a better process for everyone, and better opportunities for all kids and young people. Thank you very much.